So today we're going to continue this wonderful video on the secret intelligence of water, where Veda Austin, she has studied water and realizes that water imprints. So let's continue watching this video. It's fascinating, and I'm going to also compare it to the law of wind tarot.
So I wrote the word stairway just out of curiosity to see what would happen. And sure enough, I saw the stairway appear. And I'm like, well, let's do it again. So I did it again. And I did it again. And I ended up doing it 50 times. And I'm like, well, okay, I think I can safely say that this...
When people are asked on surveys, what's the number one reason for failure? Do you know what they say? Because it isn't like...
This is a symbol for the meaning of stairway, or the energy of stairway. But then I was thinking, what do you do with a stairway? And so I thought, well, you climb up it. So I wrote the words climb up, and I did it again. And sure enough, I saw the stairway appear. And so I started to realize this is actually a very complex symbolic language that has layers of meaning. And what I've done, because I have a busy life, I have 3 children and I'm doing all kinds of things, I couldn't always do tests over and over and over again all in a row. So I would do them when I could. So they weren't all done in one day. Sometimes they were done over the course of months. And so what's interesting about doing it that way is that you can't say, well, the information was somehow still resonating in the Petri dish from the last one. The fact that they happen whenever I do them, maybe the next day, maybe a different Petri dish, maybe even different water, and I would see the same imagery. So the water that I like to use is a spring water. I really find that tap water struggles to form as much imagery because it's gone through what I call more trauma. It's gone through a lot of right angles. It tends to have a lot of pollutants in it. Whereas spring water, especially from a deep aquifer, has more ability to share information. Now, I also work with these signature patterns of water. So each different type of water tends to have a signature pattern. Tap water forms very disordered types of patterns. Spring water forms what I call fern hexagons. It's a hexagonal shaped kind of star with little ferns that come off each arm, very similar to a snowflake. You might see ferns in river water. All these different waters tend to have their own pattern. So when I teach people the technique, I say, get to know the patterns of your water. Do at least 10 images with no expectation. Just do it, see what water wants to show you. And once you know what your water looks like, then if you put the water into, say, a singing bowl and play it, and then freeze it, you'll see that there's been a significant change. And that is proof that there has been some kind of evidence to say that whatever you had done with the water has changed it, what I call energetic state of health. So if you have tap water and you know that it has these disordered patterns, and then you play it, pour some into a singing bowl and play it, and then you start to see hexagonal patterns and geometries, you can know that there has been an energetic state of health improvement. And I say that because the water doesn't change chemically, but it changes structurally. So for example, if you were sick, and your doctor says you have this disease, and somebody comes to your house and gives you a hug and tells you look beautiful, makes you feel good, you can choose whether you can be happy or sad. So when you have that kind of positive emotion, and that emotion really starts to make you feel good, what you're doing is there is an energetic state of health that improves within you. We all feel it when we start to feel like happy. So I've seen that there's an energetic state of health that also happens in water. So any positive change is a good change towards improvement. And so it's interesting because I've also studied egg albumin, because I'm very interested in water that's naturally informed. So when you study egg white or egg albumin, there is 2 parts to the egg white. There is this gloopy gelatinous part, and then there's another part that looks very much like saliva. When you freeze that saliva part of the egg white, I've identified 6 patterns that form from free-range, happy chicken eggs. But what I've observed is that caged hen eggs, when you do the same test, they at the very best only form 2 patterns. So it suggests that trauma seems to affect this kind of amniotic fluid stage. It's all very, very interesting, but I posted something on social media, it must have been about a month ago.
This is very, very, very crazy and cool at the same time, because one thing that I discovered probably through my readings, I don't remember, maybe it was Dr. Bruce Lipton, but amniotic fluid is what records the mom's emotions, which are absorbed through to the embryo, the fetus, who is already pre-programmed with the mother's emotions when they are delivered into this world. So you don't come in absolute purity. You come already already imprinted with whatever traumas your mom is going through. If your mom's not supported, you're going to already be programmed with that. It's very interesting. And that she just kind of proves that.
Where I went, when I was in the States, I went to this farm, and it was biodynamic farm, organic, all these different things, happy hens, and I got some of those eggs. And then I got some caged eggs. And what I did was I put one of those eggs, which I'd already tested and I knew it was beautiful, one of the good eggs, and I put the bad egg right beside it, and I left them overnight. The next day I tested them both. What was interesting is that for the very first time, I saw that the caged hen egg had actually improved in its crystallography. It was able to form more than 2 patterns. And it suggested that there was an information exchange. And so naturally, when people saw that, they said, yeah, but what if you're surrounded by really, really bad eggs? Lots and lots of bad eggs. Because that's often this human idea and experience that if one good thing is surrounded by bad things, will it be influenced? And so I did that. I put one of the good eggs and I surrounded it by about 12 caged hen eggs. And I left them overnight. And what I observed that in proximity to the circles of these eggs, the ones that were directly beside the good egg improved to such a degree that they were quite remarkably beautiful. And as they extended out, they still improved, but they didn't improve as much. So if you then bring that into terms of people and the fact that we are bodies of water that are sensitive to thoughts and emotions and environment, working on ourselves suggests that being actually our own good egg is in fact going to help others just by the fact that we are near them. I remember I've spent a lot of time in India, and my teacher over there, he said, there have been many great teachers and many saints that have come to the earth, and their energy emanates so far that it will affect people that they will never, ever meet because it has traveled to such a distance. And when I see these tests with eggs, it's very interesting, and that really resonates for me. But I've also had tests where I've had 2 glasses of water, 1 tap water, 1 spring water. And the spring water, I had a healing experience with this particular spring water. And it was 9.9 pH naturally out of the ground. Nothing done to it. The tap water was around about a 7.2. And what I did was I left them overnight side by side. And when I tested the tap water the next day, I observed not only had it structurally improved, but it had also, I found that its pH had actually gone up slightly, which was really interesting. And that ties in with the work that Luc Montagnier did, which you can Google, which is essentially he could put 2 vials of water side by side. One he put a sequence of DNA into, the other one there was no DNA in it. They were side by side, exposed to radiant light overnight. When the next day came and they tested the water that had nothing in it, they actually put some kind of powder in there to see if it could show if it had any DNA. And they found that there was actually evidence of DNA in the water that had originally had none. So, his work has been, some people think it's amazing and real and incredible, and others say, it's just pseudoscience. But I've understood and heard that it has been repeated. And that then makes you really wonder, what information transfer is happening just by being near people. Like, really, it's a very, very interesting thing. It really brings to light that idea that we are really all connected, and perhaps in many, many more ways than we could have possibly imagined. So just bringing it back around to this symbols that I was talking about, that started with the stairway to heaven and that kind of stairway symbol. I now have 35 what I've termed as hydroglyphs, these ice symbols that have meaning. And they've taken me 4 years to identify, because to say I have one hydroglyph, I have to have repeated the test at least 50 times and seen the same result each time. I have people around the world now helping me to identify the layers of meaning. And so it's incredibly interesting to see how much they overlap with hieroglyphs, and that they are symbols with conceptual meanings that are designed not to be read, but to be felt. So it's more a matter of me now trying to re-educate myself in a different way, in a way where I really have to figure out what this feels like to me, what conceptual meanings really are, because they're so big. They're not reduced down to...
what's interesting, and what I'm thinking of right now is right here, your intuition, your feminine. Intuition is yin. It's a feminine trait. Intuition, a lot of the time, comes from your subconscious mind. And that's the same thing that I kind of went through when I started following every gut feeling. What that did for me, now I do it all the time because I'm so used to it. But what changed when I started doing that is when I looked out into the world, like even now, I see how nature is communicating with me directly, how conscious, the super conscious here, the matrix, is communicating me through the great way here all the time. So that's kind of where I'm at too. It's interesting she's saying that, because now I'm at, okay, what is the feeling I'm feeling right now? Because I have to remember that feeling. It's like, you know how psychics, when they read you, you go for a psychic reading, they have certain symbols that mean certain things. Like if their head starts hurting, they might say, oh, did your loved one died of blunt trauma to the head, force to the head? Did he experience a lot of headaches? Like stuff like that. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take the information that I get from the external and the internal, so the subconscious right here, and through the great way, and really transform it into, like, transform it by understanding the feeling behind it and relating it to something. And I'm still in this experience, so I don't know what it looks like. But right now, the unconscious does get in the way for me. So the catalyst here is maybe I'm just not trusting enough. Maybe I'm still not aware enough, but I'm really, when there's repeated symbols that are coming to me, which happens from external environment or even my internal, instead of putting thought to them, I'm just like, okay, I'm feeling this. So what could this be in general? Yeah, it's just interesting, right? This is how you get better in life. This is how you grow in experience.
This is a phone. It's more around what is this a symbol of to me? If you were to look at every single thing that we see, which is all information, and then ask the question, what does this symbolize to me? We would view it quite differently. So when you look at the phone, we could say this is a phone. But if we were to look at this and say this is a symbol, we call it a phone, but what does it mean to me? Then that is going to give you a whole different view on everything. So if everything we see with these four phase water eyes is a symbol, that's my freezer making noise, it kind of makes us see the world in a slightly different way. It's actually a very, very interesting way to start viewing things, because it takes away kind of a lot of what we think we know. It brings a lot more meaning into our lives, even with people. We could say we attach labels to people and ourselves. I could say I'm Veda. My freezer has a lot to say tonight, but to you, you could say, well, okay, she's Veda, and I could suggest to you, well, what do I mean to you? So tonight we're listening to lots of different people, and I'm talking about things that water can show us. So what does that mean to you? And that brings in so well with what I suggest to people. For people that really struggle to believe, like, how is it possible that water can design this face and this face and this face? And I've done that a lot, where I've actually used different people's photographs and put my petri dish of water on top of them, frozen it using my technique, and seeing their particular features showing. So it's not just random. It's very, very real. When you see the thousands of photos I share, it kind of brings it into a whole different way of viewing it. But then the question keeps coming up, well, what does it mean? What does this all mean? And I don't know that I have the answer to that. I think it's going to mean something different for each person. So when I say, when and it's interesting, when I actually show a number of scientists the work, and they see the head, or they see the face, or they see the shape, quite often they're kind of freaked out. It's kind of like, what is this? What is this magic? And so, because it almost, for some people, it's so mind-bending, I suggest, well, if you find it really hard to get your mental head around, why don't you just see it as art? Because when you see something as art, and you could see it as organic art, then rather than question...
Isn't that beautiful? She's changing her language, and often that's all you have to do. People will be freaked out about something, but you change your language and you stop explaining yourself. You can't... Once they do that, you can no longer explain yourself. You change your language, and what that does, it gives them different perspective.
Well, how, and all those things that the logical mind is desperate to understand, you can say, well, what does this image mean to me? Gosh, isn't that amazing that came out of that freezer? And you don't just throw it away so it loses its meaning. It actually gains meaning for you when you incorporate it as an art piece. And so, but what I'm happy about is that actually the science world is starting to become interested in this, especially within the repeated studies. And I'm encouraged by that, because really, I think there's incredibly profound and important here. And my friend Jerry Pollack, he actually said, you know, if you put this whole study together and you put together all the repeated studies, which I've been working on and I'm nearly there, then really, when you see this and you see the evidence of it, and you have other people doing it, which I do, then this, he said, could be one of the most important discoveries of our time. And whenever I have these workshops and teach people how to do that, I say that to them. Can be one of the most important discoveries of our time, and you can be part of that. This isn't just about me having this special relationship with water. We are all having relationships with water, because we're all bodies of water having relationships with one another, with nature, with animals, with our natural world. And so I think there is something incredibly important about this discovery. And so, I mean, there's many things I could talk about, but I can see that I'm also only have a few minutes left. How does your mood affect? Well, one of the things I think about is I've studied bodily fluids as well. And I've often thought that if eyes are the windows to the soul, then tears are expression of spirit. And I think that water really is emotion, and tears particularly are emotion that we can both see, taste, and touch. If you were to say, you know, what does an emotion look like? The only way we can really talk about it is what our face makes when we're happy, or when we're sad, or this person makes me feel like this by doing this. But tears are actually an emotion we can see. And I learned something recently, in the last few months, that I found very interesting. Tears are also designed as a medicine for us. So in our deepest sorrow, when we're really, really crying from the depths of in that pain, our face is designed a specific way where tears roll from our eyes, around our cheeks, back into our mouth.
Yeah.
They're actually designed, it's designed to be a medicine to help heal and ease our hearts. And I find that this is just another example of how sophisticated the water within us really is, and how well it knows us. And whether water is consciousness or water is the glove on the hand of consciousness, I really believe, after seeing so much evidence, water isn't just reacting to these influences. Water appears to be responding. And it is a very different, huge leap. It's like a quantum leap in this idea that perhaps water isn't what we have always thought it was. In ancient times and in indigenous times, my father is Maori, and there is this belief that we have as a culture that water is in fact a living being. It's not it's not a resource, it's a relative. And when we think about it in these terms, in ancient times, water wasn't called water. It was called the waters. And then it became water when plumbing came into being in Roman times. And then it's getting reduced down to H2O. But actually, where you'll hear that term, the waters, still, is when we say her waters broke. Because it's still considered the sacred water source. And so I actually personally think that water isn't a resource, it is source. And when you start applying this concept and idea to many different very big world questions and world views, it starts to actually make sense, which is a very, very interesting thing. And I realize I've spoken for 45 minutes and I don't want to go over. I'm sure you have many people all lined up. So I could go on for another 3 hours, but it's also just about midnight here too. So I might have to leave it at that.
I could easily listen another 3 hours. It's so many, it's amazing. I mean,
Well, there you guys have it. Isn't that so beautiful? I love this woman. Yeah, so I linked everything yesterday down below in part 1. I'll link it in this one too. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did and learned as much as I did too. See you in tomorrow's vlog. Bye.